They told the world she died in childbirth. They held a funeral, buried an empty casket, and wiped their tears for the cameras. But Laura wasn't dead. For 19 years, she was a prisoner in her own father's attic, hidden away. Because she was born without a wolf, a genetic failure in a bloodline obsessed with perfection. They treated her like a dirty secret, a stain on the family name. But they forgot one thing: nature doesn't make mistakes. When the Alpha King arrived to demand a tithe, he didn't smell a broken girl. He smelled a queen, and he was ready to burn the world down to get to her. The damp stone walls of the cellar under Hawthorne Manor didn't hold warmth even in the height of summer. For Laura Hawthorne, the cold was a companion she had known since she was 5 years old. That was the year her father, Alpha Harlan, realized his youngest daughter wasn't going to shift. She was 19 now, a ghost in a house of predators. Upstairs, the floorboards creaked with the frantic energy of preparation. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light, filtering through the cellar's high barred window. Laura sat on her thin cot, her fingers tracing the spine of a worn book, the only luxury her older sister Tessa had accidentally discarded down the laundry chute years ago. You hear that defect. The heavy iron door at the top of the stairs groaned open. Tessa stood there, silhouetted by the golden light of the hallway, looking like an avenging angel in silk and diamonds. At 21, Tessa was everything Laura was not: a shifted wolf, a socialite and the pride of the Ironwood pack. Laura didn't look up. "I hear vacuum cleaners, Tessa, and fear." Tessa descended the stairs, her heels clicking sharply on the stone. She wrinkled her nose, though Laura kept her small prison impeccably clean. "Father is pacing a hole in the carpet. King Lucian is coming." Today, the name made the air in the room feel heavier. King Lucian Vane. The alpha of alphas. He ruled the 7 territories with a brutality that made grown men tremble. Rumors said he was looking for a mate, but more importantly, he was conducting a census. Every wolf had to be accounted for. "Why are you down here?" Laura asked quietly. "Come to gloat before you become a queen." "I came to make sure you know the rules," Tessa sneered, stepping closer. She grabbed Laura's chin, her manicured nails digging into the soft skin. "Not a sound. If the king or his beta hears a whimpering human in the basement, Father will kill you before they can ask questions. You are dead, Laura. You died 19 years ago. Remember that." Laura pulled her face away. "I have no reason to speak to your king." "Good." Tessa smoothed her dress, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "Because tonight I secure the Hawthorne legacy. And once I am queen, I'll have this cellar sealed with concrete, permanently." Tessa turned and left, the heavy lock sliding home with a finality that echoed in Laura's chest. Laura waited until the footsteps faded. She wasn't just human, as they claimed. She felt things. She felt the vibrations of the house. She felt the terror radiating off her father upstairs. Alpha Harlan was a man of pride, but he was also a fraud. He had cooked the pack's books to hide his declining wealth, and he had faked a death certificate to hide his broken daughter. If King Lucian found out, execution would be a mercy. Hours passed. The sun dipped, casting the cellar into shadow. Then the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't a sound. It was a pressure. The air suddenly felt charged, like the ozone smell before a lightning strike. A convoy of black SUVs had just rolled onto the gravel driveway. Upstairs, the house went silent. Laura stood up and walked to the corner of the room, pressing her ear against the cold water pipe that ran up through the walls to the main dining hall. It was her secret conduit to the world above. She heard the heavy thud of the front doors opening. "Your Majesty," came her father's voice. It was trembling. "We are honored. The Ironwood pack is yours." A deep baritone voice replied. It was smooth, dark, and carried a resonance that made the pipes vibrate against Laura's ear. "Skip the pleasantries, Harlan. Your tithe payments are light. I'm here to see why." Laura's breath hitched. That voice. It didn't sound like a monster. It sounded like Judgment Day. The dining room of Hawthorne Manor was set with the finest silver borrowed from a creditor the week prior. Alpha Harlan stood at the head of the table, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the air conditioning. Beside him, Tessa posed wearing a red dress cut low enough to be inviting, but high enough to feign modesty. King Lucian Vane sat at the opposite end. He was terrifyingly still. He wore a charcoal suit that struggled to contain the muscle of his shoulders. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, grey and swirling with an ancient intelligence. Behind him stood his Beta Jackson, a man whose scar-crossed face suggested he enjoyed violence. "The audit of your pack lands showed discrepancies," Lucian said, pushing a file across the mahogany table. He hadn't touched the food. 300 acres unaccounted for, and the pack roster. It feels incomplete. Harlan swallowed hard. "Incomplete, Your Majesty. I assure you every wolf is registered. Tessa here is my only heir." Tessa smiled, batting her lashes. "My father speaks the truth, my king. It has been a lonely household since my mother passed." She leaned forward, releasing a wave of synthetic pheromones she had bought in the city to enhance her appeal. Lucian's nostrils flared, but not with desire. He looked at her with clinical boredom. "Your scent is cloying," he said flatly. "It smells like desperation and cheap perfume." Tessa's smile shattered. Harlan gasped. "Your Majesty, my daughter is—" "Quiet," Lucian commanded. The word was not shouted, but it carried the weight of an alpha command. Harlan's mouth snapped shut against his will. Lucian stood up. He paced slowly around the table. "I have a talent, Harlan. It's why I hold the crown. I can smell a lie. And this house—" He ran a finger along the mantelpiece, checking for dust. "This house reeks of deception. We hide nothing." Harlan squeaked the alpha command, releasing him just enough to speak. "Is that so?" Lucian stopped. He tilted his head, listening. Down in the cellar, Laura had moved away from the pipe. She was pacing. The anxiety from upstairs was leaking down through the floorboards, making her skin prickle. She hummed a low, mournful tune to calm herself, a lullaby her mother had sung before she died. Lucian's head snapped toward the floor. "What is that?" the king whispered. "What is what, sire?" Tessa asked, her voice trembling. "That sound. A heartbeat. Slow, steady, and a voice." Lucian walked to the center of the room, looking down at the Persian rug. "Who is under the floor?" Harlan's face went grey. The boiler, Your Majesty. Old pipes. They groan." Lucian looked at Jackson. "Jackson, tear up this rug." "No," Harlan shouted, stepping forward. "You cannot. It is the foundation." Jackson didn't hesitate. With one hand, he shoved the heavy dining table aside, silver crashing to the floor. With the other, he ripped the expensive rug away, revealing a trap door that had been cleverly disguised with wood laminate. Lucian stared at the padlock securing it. "You lock your boiler with industrial steel." "It's for safety," Harlan stammered. Dangerous fumes. Lucian leaned down. He took a deep breath. His eyes widened, and for the first time the grey irises flashed a brilliant, glowing gold. That is not fumes. Lucian growled a low rumble, starting in his chest that shook the windows. That is the scent of winter rain and wood smoke. It is the purest thing I have smelled in this entire territory. He stood up, towering over Harlan. Open it. Now! I lost the key. Harlan lied, desperate. Lucian didn't ask again. He raised his foot and brought it down on the trapdoor. The wood splintered, the lock shattered, and the hinges screamed as the door caved in. Dust rose from the dark abyss. Jackson, hold them here, Lucian ordered. If they move, tear their throats out. The king descended into the darkness. Laura had backed into the furthest corner of the cellar when the ceiling exploded. She shielded her eyes from the debris. Through the dust, she saw a pair of boots hit the stone floor. She grabbed a rusted metal shard she kept for protection, holding it out with a shaking hand. Stay back, she warned. Her voice was hoarse from disuse. Lucian stepped into the beam of light. He saw the cot. He saw the bucket of water. He saw the girl, thin, pale, wearing a dress that was 3 sizes too big, held together with safety pins. But beneath the dirt and the fear, he saw eyes that mirrored his own, grey, defiant and burning with a power she didn't know she possessed. He took a step forward, and the beast inside him, the wolf that had rejected 1,000 high-born she-wolves, slammed against his rib cage, howling a single word. Mine. Who are you? Lucian asked, his voice, surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to the violence upstairs. I am nobody, Laura whispered, gripping the metal shard tighter. I am the ghost. Lucian ignored the weapon. He walked right up to the tip of the shard, letting it press against his expensive shirt. He looked down at her, inhaling deeply. You are no ghost, he murmured, reaching out to tuck a stray lock of matted hair behind her ear. The sparks that flew when his skin touched hers caused the light bulb overhead to flicker and burst. You are the storm I've been waiting for. They say I'm broken, Laura stammered, overwhelmed by his intensity. I have no wolf. Lucian smiled, a terrifying, predatory grin. Little one, you don't have a wolf, because a wolf is too small to contain your soul. You are something else entirely. He turned back toward the stairs, his demeanor shifting from gentle to apocalyptic instantly. Come with me. My father, your father. Lucian said, his voice dropping to a register that promised death, is about to learn what happens when you cage a queen. Lucian ascended the cellar stairs with Laura in his arms. She was lighter than a breath of air, her bones sharp against his chest, her skin fever-hot. She buried her face in his jacket, the smell of his sandalwood and rain scent overwhelming her senses after years of breathing mildew and stagnation. When he kicked the dining room door open, the silence that fell over the room was absolute. Alpha Harlan was shaking, clutching the edge of the overturned table. Tessa stood by the window, her face a mask of horrified disbelief. They looked at the creature in the king's arms, dirty, matted hair, smelling of the underground, and then they looked at the king's face. Lucian's expression was a mask of cold fury. The gold in his eyes had not faded. It churned like molten metal. You told me she died, Lucian said softly. The volume of his voice was low, but the alpha command laced within it made the glass in the windows vibrate. You told the council she passed in her sleep. You filed a death certificate. She is broken. Harlan finally shouted, his fear turning into a defensive shriek. Look at her. She has no wolf. She is a genetic dead end. I did it to protect the pack's reputation. An alpha line cannot be weak. Weak, Lucien repeated. He walked to the head of the table and gently set Laura down on one of the few remaining upright chairs. He stood beside her, a dark sentinel. You locked a child in the dark for 19 years, Harlan, and she survived. She didn't go mad. She didn't break. She endured. Lucien turned his gaze to Tessa. And you with your furs and your diamonds. You knew. Tessa scoffed, crossing her arms though her hands trembled. She's an embarrassment, Your Majesty. She's a mute little rat. You should thank us for keeping her out of sight. She would have polluted the gene pool. Laura shrank back into the chair, the cruelty of her sister's words stinging like a whip. But then she felt a large, warm hand rest on her shoulder. Lucien wasn't squeezing. He was anchoring her. Jackson, Lucien said, not looking away from Harlan. Sire. The scarred beta stepped forward, a tablet in his hand. Access the Imperial database. Revoke the charter for the Ironwood Pack immediately. Harlan's knees buckled. You can't. That is our heritage. We have held these lands for 300 years. And you lost them in 3 minutes, Lucien replied. The Ironwood lands are now Crown property. Your assets are frozen. Your accounts are seized to pay for the reparations owed to this girl. Reparations, Tessa screeched. She's a null. She deserves nothing. Lucien moved so fast that Laura didn't see him move. She only felt the wind of his motion. In a blink, he had his hand wrapped around Tessa's throat, lifting her feet off the floor. He didn't squeeze hard enough to kill, but enough to terrify. She, Lucien snarled into Tessa's face, is my mate. The word hit the room like a physical blow. Harlan gasped, falling to his knees. Impossible! She has no wolf! She cannot be a true mate! Lucien dropped Tessa. She collapsed in a heap, coughing and gasping for air. The moon goddess does not make mistakes, Harlan. Only men do. Lucien straightened his cuffs. I am not going to kill you. Death is too easy. It's too quick. He looked down at the former alpha, his eyes devoid of mercy. You cared about status. You cared about appearance. Then you shall have neither. Jackson, mark them. Harlan screamed as Jackson stepped forward, his claws extending. It wasn't a lethal strike. It was a mark of shame, a specific slash across the pack tattoo on the forearm that signified an Omega who had been stripped of rank for crimes against kin. It was a social death sentence. No other pack would take them in. They would be pariahs, forced to work the lowest jobs just to eat. Get out of my house, Lucien said. Your house? Harlan whimpered, clutching his bleeding arm. It belongs to Laura now, Lucien said calmly. And since she is coming with me, this place will be burned to the ground. I won't have her smelling your stench ever again. Lucien turned back to Laura. He took off his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled of safety. Can you walk, or shall I carry you? Laura looked at her father, sobbing on the floor. She looked at Tessa, who was staring at her with pure, unadulterated hatred. For the first time in her life, Laura didn't feel small. I can walk, she rasped. She stood up on shaky legs. She didn't look back as she walked out the front door. Outside, the night air hit her like a physical wave, crisp, full of pine and earth. She inhaled greedily, tears finally spilling over. The convoy of black SUVs waited, engines idling. As Lucien guided her into the back of the lead vehicle, a massive armored beast of a car, he didn't let go of her hand. "Burn it," Lucien ordered into his comms. As the car pulled away, Laura watched through the rear window. Jackson and the enforcers were tossing incendiary flares into the open windows of Hawthorne Manor. Within seconds, the symbol of her imprisonment was engulfed in roaring orange flames. "It's gone," Laura whispered, the shock setting in. "It's just ash," Lucien said, pulling her attention to him. He opened a compartment and pulled out a bottle of water, unscrewing the cap for her. "The past is ash. We only look forward now." Laura took the water, her hands trembling. "Where are we going?" "Home," Lucien said, "to the Obsidian Citadel." And Laura, "Yes. You will never be cold again." The drive took 4 hours. Laura slept for most of it, her body shutting down after the adrenaline dump. When she woke, the car was winding up a steep mountain road. Through the tinted glass, she saw it. The Obsidian Citadel. It wasn't just a castle. It was a fortress carved directly into the black rock of the Shadow Peak Mountain. Towers pierced the clouds, and the walls were patrolled by wolves the size of ponies. It was a place of war, of power, and of absolute authority. Laura felt a seed of panic in her chest. She was a girl who had lived in a box. This place was a city. "Breathe," Lucien murmured beside her. He hadn't slept. He had been watching her the entire time, guarding her rest. "They cannot hurt you. You are under my protection." "They will hate me," Laura said quietly. "I'm not like you. I can't shift. I can't mind link. I'm defective." Lucien's jaw tightened. "If anyone uses that word within these walls, they lose their tongue. Do you understand?" The car pulled into a massive courtyard paved with cobblestones. Dozens of people were waiting, servants, guards, and dignitaries. As the door opened, a hush fell over the crowd. They had expected the king to return with a tithe, or perhaps a prisoner. They did not expect him to step out, holding the hand of a frail girl wearing a dirty rag and the king's own jacket. Lucien guided her out. The scent of the court hit Laura hundreds of wolves. It was overwhelming. She felt dizzy. "Eyes down," Jackson barked at the staring crowd. "Show respect." The crowd bowed, but Laura could feel their curiosity. It felt like needles on her skin. A tall, elegant woman with severe glasses and a clipboard stepped forward. This was Lady Genevieve, the head of household affairs. She was a high-ranking wolf, pristine and sharp. "Your Majesty," Genevieve said, her eyes flicking over Laura with thinly veiled distaste. We're not expecting a guest. I can have the servants' quarters prepared. She is not a guest." Lucien cut her off, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "She is the future of this court. Prepare the royal suite." Genevieve faltered. The Queen's suite, sire, that has been closed for 50 years. It is reserved for—" "Do I stutter, Genevieve?" Lucien's growl was low, vibrating in the chests of everyone present. "No, sire. Immediately, sire." Genevieve bowed low, but Laura caught the flash of judgment in her eyes. Human. Weak. Dirty. Lucien swept Laura past them into the grand hallway. The floors were marble, the chandeliers dripping with crystals. It was beautiful but cold. "I need to get you to Dr. Aris," Lucien said, guiding her toward a private elevator. "We need to check for malnutrition and injuries." Dr. Aris was a kind older man, with salt and pepper hair and a gentle demeanor. His infirmary was state-of-the-art. He didn't look at Laura with disgust. He looked at her with clinical sadness. 19 years, Aris murmured as he scanned her vitals. It is a miracle her bones didn't atrophy completely. She is severely underweight, dehydrated, and has multiple healed fractures that were never set properly. Lucian stood in the corner, his arms crossed, radiating a murderous energy. Every injury Aris listed was another nail in Harlan's coffin. But Aris paused, looking at the bloodwork results on his screen. He frowned, tapping the glass. "What?" Lucian demanded, stepping forward. "Her white blood cell count," Aris said, confused. "It's extremely high, not like an infection, like she has an immune system that is fighting something constantly, and her genetic markers. What about them? She has the markers of a wolf, sire. They are all there. The dormant genes are active, but they are being suppressed." Laura looked up from the exam table. "Suppressed by what?" "I don't know," Aris admitted. "It's like a biological lock. Usually a wolf shifts at 13. If they don't, the wolf dies or fades. Yours isn't dead. It's waiting." Lucian looked at Laura, his eyes narrowing. "Waiting for what?" "That is the question," Aris said. "We will need to get her healthy first. A shift now would kill her. Her body is too weak." After the exam, Lucian took her to the royal suite. It was larger than the entire ground floor of her father's house. The bed was massive, draped in velvet. There was a balcony overlooking the mountain range. "I have meetings with the War Council," Lucian said, looking reluctant to leave. "I have posted 4 guards at your door. No one enters unless you allow it. Maids will bring you a bath and clothes. Proper clothes." He stepped closer, tilting her chin up. "You are safe here, Laura. Try to believe it." He left, and for the first time in hours, Laura was alone. But she wasn't. She walked to the balcony doors. As she touched the handle, she felt it again, that vibration she used to feel in the cellar pipes. But this time it was louder. It was a hum resonating from the stone of the castle itself. She opened the doors and stepped out. The wind whipped her hair. "Queen." The whisper was so faint, she thought she imagined it. She turned around. The room was empty. "Queen." It wasn't a voice. It was the wind. It was the stone. Laura shivered. She went into the bathroom, where a massive tub was already filled with steaming water. She stripped off the dirty dress, letting it fall to the floor. She looked at herself in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. Ribs, showing bruises, fading pale as a sheet. She stepped into the water, sinking down until it covered her chin. An hour later, there was a knock at the door. "Enter," Laura said, wrapping a thick robe around herself. It was Lady Genevieve. She was holding a dress, but her expression was anything but servitude. She walked in, dropping the dress on the bed, a simple, plain grey thing more suited for a governess than a royal guest. "The king requested you be clothed," Genevieve said icily. "I found something suitable for your station." Laura looked at the drab dress. "The king said I was the future of the court. This looks like a servant's uniform." Genevieve laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "Oh, honey, don't let the king's pity confuse you. He brought you here because he is possessive. He collects things. But you are a human with a broken gene. You will never be Luna. The pack will never accept a leader who cannot shift. Enjoy the silk sheets while you can. By next week, you'll be forgotten." Genevieve turned to leave. Laura felt a surge of heat in her chest. Not anger, something hotter. Something ancient. "Genevieve," Laura said. The woman stopped, looking back over her shoulder. "Yes." Laura walked over to the bed. She picked up the grey dress. She walked to the fireplace where a log fire was crackling. "What are you doing?" Genevieve asked, her eyes widening. Laura tossed the dress into the fire. It caught instantly, the fabric curling into ash. "I don't wear grey," Laura said, her voice steady. "Bring me red, or tell the king you refuse to clothe his mate." Genevieve's mouth opened, then closed. She stared at Laura, looking for the scared cellar girl. She didn't find her. "As you wish," Genevieve hissed and stormed out. Laura watched the fire burn. The hum in the walls grew louder, sounding almost like a purr. The castle liked her. But down in the dark of the forest below the citadel, something else was stirring. A rogue pack watching the lights of the castle. And among them, a man with eyes like a serpent, holding a picture of a girl who was supposed to be dead. "Found you," he whispered. 3 weeks had passed since Laura arrived at the Obsidian Citadel. Under Dr. Aris's care, and with access to actual food, the hollows in her cheeks had filled out. Her skin, once grey and papery, now glowed with a hint of porcelain health. But the court was restless. Rumours were spreading that the king kept a pet rather than a queen. To silence the whispers, Lucien announced the Blood Moon Gala. It was the most important diplomatic event of the year, where the alphas of the Allied territories came to renew their vows of loyalty. It was also Laura's public debut. In the royal suite, Laura stared at herself in the mirror. Lady Genevieve had grudgingly followed orders. The dress was not grey. It was a deep blood-red velvet that clung to Laura's frame like a second skin. It was off-the-shoulder daring, but elegant, with a slit that ran up to her mid-thigh. "You look—" Ivy, the young maid assigned to Laura, paused, searching for the word. "Like war, my lady." Laura touched the ruby necklace Lucien had sent up. "That's the point, isn't it? To show them I'm not a victim." There was a knock on the door. Lucien entered. He stopped dead in his tracks. He was wearing his formal military dress uniform, black with gold braiding medals gleaming on his chest. But his eyes were fixed solely on her. "Genevieve will be demoted," Lucien said, his voice thick. "Why?" Laura asked, panicked. "Is the dress wrong?" "No." Lucien walked over, taking her hand and kissing the knuckles. "It is too right. She has made every man in that ballroom my enemy tonight, for they will all be jealous." They descended the grand staircase together. As the herald announced His Majesty King Lucien Vane and his companion Laura, the music stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned upward. Laura felt the weight of their judgment. She heard the snickers. "Look at her," a woman in green whispered loudly. "She walks like a human. No grace." "I heard she was a cellar rat," a man replied. "Alpha Harlan's discard." Lucien's grip on her hand tightened his claws, threatening to puncture his gloves. "Ignore them. Look at me." They reached the floor. The first hour was a gauntlet of fake smiles. Then came Alpha Kael of the Riverlands. He was a massive, brutish man who had long eyed Lucien's territory. "King Lucien," Kael boomed, swirling a glass of champagne. He looked Laura up and down with open disrespect. "So this is the charity case. I must say she cleans up well. But what good is a queen who cannot breed strong pups? A human womb is weak." The room went deathly silent. Lucien let go of Laura's hand. The air pressure in the room dropped. "Careful, Kael. You are drinking my wine and breathing my air. Do not waste the privilege." Kael laughed. "I speak only facts. I challenge her right to stand by you. If she is wolf, let her shift. Let her show us her beast." "She does not perform for you," Lucien snarled. "Then she is nothing," Kael spat. Suddenly, a movement caught Laura's eye. A waiter moving too fast, sliding between the guests. He wasn't looking at the drinks. He was looking at Lucian's exposed back. Laura didn't think. She didn't analyze. A primal instinct, something she had never felt before, screamed in her brain. Protect, mate. Lucian! Laura screamed. As the waiter drew a dagger, a blade glowing with the violet sheen of wolfsbane and silver nitrate, Laura threw herself in front of the king. The blade didn't hit Lucian. It plunged into Laura's shoulder. The pain was blinding. It felt like liquid fut was being poured into her veins. Laura collapsed, gasping. Laura! Lucian's roar shook the foundation of the castle. He backhanded the assassin with such force that the man's neck snapped instantly, sending him flying across the room. Lucian fell to his knees, gathering Laura into his arms. No, no, no. Aris! Get Aris! Laura convulsed. The wolfsbane was spreading. But then something impossible happened. The lock that Dr. Aris had found in her blood, the suppression of her genes, shattered under the extreme stress of the poison. Her body, realizing it was dying, engaged the nuclear option. Laura's back arched. Her bones cracked loudly, sickeningly. She's dying! A guest screamed. No, Lucian whispered, his eyes widening as he watched the wound on her shoulder hiss and close up steam rising from her skin. She's waking up. Laura screamed a sound that started human and ended in a terrifying multi-tonal howl that shattered every wine glass in the ballroom. Fur erupted from her skin, not the brown or grey of a common wolf, nor the black of the king. It was white, pure blinding starlight white. And it was massive. Clothes shredded as the beast took form. When Laura finished shifting, she stood in the center of the ballroom, towering over even Alpha Kyle. She was a dire wolf, a creature of legend, thought to be extinct for 1,000 years. Her eyes were not wolf eyes, they were glowing violet. The assassin, who was merely stunned, tried to crawl away. The white wolf moved. She didn't run. She teleported a blur of white motion. She landed on the assassin, her jaws snapping around his torso. With a single shake of her head, she ended the threat. Then she turned her massive head toward Alpha Kyle. She growled a sound like grinding tectonic plates. Kyle, the arrogant Alpha, fell to his knees, exposing his neck in absolute submission. The entire ballroom followed suit. Even Lucian, the Alpha King, felt the urge to bow. Laura had not just shifted. She had revealed herself as an apex. The infirmary was quiet, save for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Laura had shifted back to human form after an hour of pacing the ballroom, guarding Lucian. The effort had caused her to pass out. She lay in the bed now, pale again, but the frailty was gone. Even in sleep, she radiated power. Lucian sat by her side, holding her hand. He hadn't moved for 6 hours. "Your Majesty," Jackson whispered, entering the room. He looked shaken. "We identified the assassin. He wasn't a rogue." Lucian turned his eyes cold. "Who was he?" "He was a member of the Royal Guard, assigned to the West Gate." "A traitor inside." Lucian stood up. "Who paid him?" "We traced his sudden influx of credits," Jackson said, handing over a tablet. "It was routed through shell companies, but the source is the Ironwood accounts, but not Harlan." "Harlan is destitute," Lucian said. "He has nothing." "Not Harlan," Jackson corrected. "The accounts were accessed using an old encryption key, one that belonged to Laura's mother." Lucian frowned. Her mother died 19 years ago. Did she? The door to the infirmary opened, but it wasn't a doctor. It was High Councilman Draven. Draven was one of the oldest wolves in the kingdom, a man Lucian had trusted since he was a boy. Draven, Lucian said, I am not in the mood for politics. This is not politics, my boy, Draven said, closing the door and crucially locking it. This is pest control. Lucian sensed the threat instantly. He moved to stand between Draven and Laura. What are you doing? I told Harlan to kill the child when she was born, Draven said, with a heavy sigh, pulling a heavy silver-plated pistol from his robe. I told him the gene would resurface. He was too weak to do it. He hid her instead, hoping the lack of shifting would fool us. But you had to go and dig her up. Why? Lucian growled, his claws extending. She is a dire wolf. She is a blessing to the pack. She is a curse, Draven snapped. Do you not know the history? The white wolves do not rule. They purge. If she rises, the council falls. The old laws fall. She is chaos incarnate. Her mother knew that. That's why we killed her. Lucian's world stopped. You killed the former Luna of Ironwood. She refused to suppress the child's magic. We had no choice. Draven raised the gun. Move, Lucian. I do not wish to shoot my king, but I will to save our way of life. You'll have to kill me, Lucian snarled. Very well. Draven pulled the trigger. Bang! The bullet didn't hit Lucian. A hand, a delicate human hand, caught the bullet in midair. Lucian spun around. Laura was sitting up in bed. Her eyes were open, and they were glowing, that terrifying violet hue. Smoke curled from her palm, where the silver bullet sizzled against her skin, but it didn't pierce her. You killed my mother? Laura asked. Her voice wasn't just her own. It sounded like a chorus of 1,000 voices speaking at once. Draven's hand shook. You are an abomination. No, Laura said, swinging her legs off the bed. She didn't look tired anymore. I am the reckoning. Laura flicked her wrist. The bullet flew back at Draven, burying itself in his shoulder. He screamed, dropping the gun. Before Lucian could intervene, the window of the infirmary shattered inward. Ropes dropped from the roof. 4 figures in tactical gear, wearing gas masks, swung in. They weren't trying to kill Laura. They threw canisters of heavy, concentrated wolfsbane gas military grade. Hold your breath, Lucian shouted, grabbing Laura. But the gas was thick instant. Lucian's knees buckled. His vision swam. He fought the paralysis, swiping at the attackers, but his limbs felt like lead. Through the haze, he saw the figures grab Laura. She fought, her violet eyes blazing, but they injected something directly into her neck, a glowing green serum. Her eyes rolled back. She went limp. The asset is secured, one of the soldiers said into a radio. Draven is compromised. Leave him. No, Lucian roared, trying to crawl toward them. Laura! The soldiers hooked Laura to a winch line. In seconds, they were hauled up out of the window, disappearing into the night sky, where a silent black helicopter hovered without lights. Lucian forced himself to the window, his body screaming in protest against the poison. He watched the helicopter bank and vanish into the storm clouds. Behind him, Jackson kicked the door in, followed by the guards. They found their king, leaning against the broken glass, watching the sky, while Councilman Draven bled out on the floor. Lucian turned. His face was a mask of absolute, unhinged violence. Lock down the kingdom, Lucian whispered, his voice dripping with bloodlust. "Wake the war wolves. Call the banners." "Sire," Jackson asked, terrified by the look in his alpha's eyes. "They took my mate," Lucian said, the gold in his eyes bleeding into black. "So I am going to slaughter them all." The roar of the C-130 transport plane was deafening, a mechanical scream that matched the chaos inside Lucian's chest. They were flying at 20,000 feet over the Deadlands, a frozen, desolate stretch of tundra north of the kingdom's border, where no pack dared to roam. The air inside the cargo hold was freezing, but Lucian didn't feel the cold. He felt only the phantom agony of the bond, the empty space in his soul, where Laura's presence usually hummed. He stood on the edge of the open ramp, the wind whipping his tactical gear against his body. Behind him, 50 of his war wolves soldiers, who had undergone painful genetic modifications to maintain their strength without shifting, checked their weapons. They were the most lethal killing force on the continent, but tonight they looked nervous. They weren't afraid of the enemy. They were afraid of their king. Lucian's eyes were pitch black. The gold had been swallowed by a darkness that promised nothing but annihilation. "Target acquired, sire," Jackson shouted over the howling wind, tapping his headset. "Thermal scans confirm a subterranean bunker 3 miles north. Heat signatures indicate approximately 300 hostiles. It's the anti-shifter coalition. Mercenaries. Heavy ordnance." Lucian gripped the hydraulic arm of the ramp, his knuckles white. "Do they know we are coming?" "They know something is coming," Jackson replied grimly. "But they have no idea what kind of something." "Good," Lucian said. His voice was devoid of humanity. "No prisoners, Jackson. I want the earth salted." "And the bunker?" Jackson asked, though he already knew the answer. "Burn it all," Lucian commanded. He didn't wait for the green light. He didn't wait for a parachute. Lucian stepped off the ramp and plummeted into the icy void, a missile made of flesh and fury, descending toward the snow-covered concrete that hid his heart. Deep beneath the permafrost, the air smelled of antiseptic and ozone. Laura was strapped vertically to a cold steel table, her arms splayed wide, held by reinforced titanium cuffs. Dozens of wires were attached to her temples and chest-feeding data into a wall of monitors that blinked with frantic speed. Dr. Kincaid, a man whose face was lined with the bitterness of a disgraced academic, paced in front of her. He wore a pristine white lab coat that clashed with the grime of the underground bunker. He spoke into a handheld recorder, his voice trembling with manic excitement. "Subject 0 to 1. Update," Kincaid muttered, glancing at the vitals on the screen. "The suppressor serum military grade, enough to kill a standard alpha in seconds, is failing. It is fascinating. Her biology isn't just resisting the toxin, it is metabolizing it. She is turning poison into fuel." Laura's head lolled forward, her hair matting against her sweat-slicked forehead. The pain was excruciating, a fire that burned through every nerve ending, but beneath the pain, something else was waking up. The lock Dr. Aris had described, the barrier her mother had placed on her genes, had been shattered by the wolfsbane. Now there was nothing holding back the tide. She lifted her head. Her eyes opened. They were no longer the soft grey of the girl in the attic, nor were they the violet of her first shift. They were white, pure, pupilless, blinding white. "Let me go," Laura whispered. The sound wasn't loud yet. It vibrated the reinforced glass of the observation deck, cracking the corner of a monitor. Kincaid stopped pacing. He looked at her, a mixture of awe and terror on his face. "We can't do that, my dear. You are the Holy Grail. Your DNA holds the secret to controlling the alpha gene. With your blood, we can strip the wolves of their power. We can make humanity dominant again." He stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with fanaticism. "Your mother understood that. She knew what you were. That's why she died. She sacrificed herself to protect the world from the monster she birthed." Laura's fingers curled against the metal restraints. The steel groaned, warping under her grip. "My mother," Laura said, her voice layering over itself, sounding like a chorus of ancient queens, "died because she was surrounded by cowards. Just like you." Suddenly, the entire bunker lurched violently to the side. Dust rained down from the ceiling tiles. The lights flickered and died, replaced instantly by the spinning crimson of emergency strobes. A siren began to scream a high-pitched wail of doom. "Report!" Kincaid yelled into the wall intercom, panic cracking his composure. "What is happening up there?" Static hissed back, followed by the sound of gunfire and wet, tearing noises. "Breach Sector 1 is gone," a mercenary screamed over the line. They didn't even use explosives. They walked through the wall." "Hold them back," Kincaid shrieked. "You have heavy machine guns." "It doesn't matter," the voice cried out, choked with terror. "It's the king. Oh God, he's not shifting. He's fighting in human form, and he's ripping the blast doors off with his bare hands. The transmission ended with a sickening crunch and dead silence. Kincaid turned pale, the recorder slipping from his sweaty hands and clattering to the floor. He looked at Laura. She was smiling. It was a terrifying, blood-chilling smile that promised judgment. "He is here," she whispered. The ground shook again, closer this time. The heavy steel door to the laboratory, a door designed to withstand a bomb, began to dent inward. Thud, thud, thud. It was the sound of a heartbeat, slow and unstoppable. Kincaid scrambled backward, his mind snapping. No, I won't let him have you. If I can't have the cure, no one can." He grabbed a syringe from a metal tray. It was filled with a glowing neon blue liquid, a neurological agent designed to liquefy the brain instantly. The kill sequence. "For humanity!" Kincaid screamed, rushing toward her with the needle raised. Boom! The ceiling of the lab didn't just collapse. It dissolved. A ventilation shaft exploded downward in a shower of sparks and debris. A figure dropped from the hole, landing in a predatory crouch between Kincaid and Laura. It was Jackson. He was covered in grey dust and red blood. He didn't hesitate. As Kincaid lunged, Jackson shifted mid-air, his human form exploding into a massive grey wolf. He slammed into Kincaid, pinning the scientist to the far wall with a bone-jarring impact. The syringe skittered across the floor, useless. Seconds later, the main blast doors flew off their hinges, spinning through the air like coins, before embedding themselves in the concrete wall. Lucien walked in. He was a nightmare brought to life. His suit jacket was gone, his dress shirt hanging in ribbons from his frame. He was soaked in blood that was not his own. His hands were coated in it. He breathed heavily, his chest heaving, his eyes scanning the room until they locked onto the figure on the table. The rage that had fueled him through 3 miles of concrete evaporated the moment he saw her. "Laura," he choked out. He crossed the room in a blur, reaching her side in a millisecond. He didn't bother with the keys or the codes. He grabbed the thick titanium cuffs binding her wrists and ripped them apart as if they were wet paper. Laura fell forward, her legs numb from the drugs. Lucien caught her, pulling her against his chest, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He was shaking tremors of adrenaline and terrifying relief. "I have you," he whispered, his voice broken and raw. "I have you, Laura. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't there." Laura leaned into him, smelling the iron of blood and the wood smoke of his scent. "You came," she breathed. "Look out!" Jackson roared from the corner. Lucian spun around, shielding Laura with his body. Kincaid, blood trickling from his mouth where Jackson had crushed his ribs, had managed to pull a grenade from his torn lab coat. His eyes were wide with madness. He pulled the pin. "Die, monsters!" Kincaid screamed. Lucian braced himself. He couldn't move Laura fast enough. He prepared to take the full force of the shrapnel into his own back to save her. But the explosion never came. Laura reached out a hand over Lucian's shoulder. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. She simply looked at the grenade flying through the air and issued a single command. "Stop!" The word wasn't spoken. It was pushed into the fabric of reality. The air in the room froze. Literally. The dust motes suspended in the red light ceased to dance. The grenade spinning mid-air, just 3 feet from them, halted completely. It hung there, defying gravity, caught in a bubble of absolute stillness. The magic of the white wolf, the power over physics, over nature, over time itself, had finally manifested. Lucian looked up, his eyes widening in disbelief. He looked at the grenade, then back at Laura. She stepped out of his embrace, her movements fluid and regal. She wasn't weak anymore. She walked over to the floating grenade. She plucked it from the air as casually as one would pick an apple from a branch. She walked to the hazardous waste disposal chute in the corner of the lab, opened the hatch, and dropped the live explosive down the shaft. She turned back to the room. She snapped her fingers. Click. Time resumed. A muffled whomp echoed from deep within the bowels of the earth as the grenade detonated harmlessly, hundreds of feet below. The floor vibrated slightly, but the danger was gone. Kincaid stared at her, his jaw slack, his mind unable to comprehend what he had just witnessed. He slid down the wall, defeated not by force but by a power he couldn't quantify. "What?" Kincaid stammered, his voice a whisper of horror. "What are you?" Laura stood tall, her white dress stained but her spirit glowing. She looked at Lucian, her mate, her king, and then turned her terrifying, pupilless gaze back to the scientist. "I am the balance," she said softly. Lucian straightened, wiping the blood from his face. He looked at Laura with a new reverence. She wasn't just his mate. She was a deity. "Take him," Lucian ordered Jackson, his voice cold as the grave. "He will wish he had died in that explosion." As Jackson dragged the screaming scientist away, Lucian took Laura's hand. "Are you all right?" Laura looked at her hand in his. The white faded from her eyes, returning to their natural grey, but the power hummed beneath her skin, a permanent storm. "Yes," she said, "I am finally awake." 6 months later. The obsidian citadel had changed. The dark, oppressive atmosphere was gone, replaced by a bustling energy. The walls were draped in banners of black and white, the colours of the king and his queen. The council had been purged. The old laws that demanded the death of imperfect pups were abolished. Laura sat on the throne beside Lucian. It was no longer a smaller chair. It was equal in size and height. She wore a gown of shimmering silver, and on her head sat a crown woven of moonstone and white gold. The doors opened, and the petitioners entered. It was Alpha Harlan. He looked unrecognizable. He was gaunt, wearing rags, working as a janitor in the lower city. He had been granted an audience only because Laura allowed it. He fell to his knees, not daring to look up. "Your Majesties—" "Stand up, Father," Laura said. Her voice was cool, detached. Harlan stood, trembling. I came to beg for forgiveness. The winter is coming. I have no shelter. Tessa ran off with a rogue pack. I am alone." Lucian growled low in his throat, his hand tightening on the armrest. He wanted to rip the man apart. Laura placed a calming hand on Lucian's arm. She looked at her father. She didn't feel hate. She didn't feel love. She felt nothing. He was a stranger. "You hid me in the dark because you feared I was weak," Laura said. "You were wrong. The dark didn't break me. It forged me." She signaled to a guard. "Give him a coat, give him a meal, and then escort him to the border." "The border?" Harlan stammered. "But where will I go?" "You will go where you sent me," Laura said softly. "Out of sight. You are banished from these lands, Harlan. If you cross the perimeter again, the king will not need to hunt you." "I will." Harlan looked into her violet eyes and saw the truth. The daughter he abused was gone. A goddess sat in her place. He bowed, weeping, and was led away. The doors closed. The court cleared out, leaving only the royal guard. Lucian turned to her. The monster who had leveled a mountain base 6 months ago looked at her with the devotion of a man who had found his religion. "You were too kind to him," Lucian murmured. "Mercy is a power, Lucian." She smiled, running a hand through his hair. "Besides, living with the knowledge of what he lost is a worse punishment than death." Lucian pulled her into his lap. "You are terrifying." "I know," Laura whispered, kissing him. "That's why you love me." Outside, the moon rose full bright and watching over a kingdom that was finally whole. The ghost of the cellar was gone. The white wolf reigned supreme. And that, my friends, is how you deal with a toxic family. Can you believe the power Laura held back that entire time? She literally stopped time to save Lucian. That is the definition of a power couple. I want to know what you think. Do you agree with Laura's decision to banish her father instead of killing him? Or do you think Lucian should have finished the job? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of revenge magic and absolute romance, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next part. I have a story coming up next week about a billionaire who rejected his mate because she was a maid only to find out she owned the company. You do not want to miss that. Until next time, keep howling.